We do not teach the real history of the United States and even of the world in our classrooms. It's very European-based, and even in our United States of America, we don't really talk about the real history of our country, the enslavement of the indigenous people, how we took their land away from them. I tell people, Google a map of the United States before 1848. And when you look at that map, you'll see a third of the map was Mexico. We can say that we were here before the United States was the United States of America. And that applies, I think, to all of the indigenous people of the continents of North America and South America. So when we talk about these immigrants that are coming to the United States, to our border, we have to say, hey, they were here first. Because the real immigrants to the United States were the European immigrants. They are the real immigrants that came to the United States. So that history has to be taught so we can get rid of this nationalistic idea. And then when we talk about racism, we know that racism comes from slavery. That racism didn't exist until we started using human beings as slaves. And because the idea that anybody should have to devote their life, their energy to make somebody else wealthy, this is what slavery is. And so they started discriminating against people of color to try to justify slavery. One of the things I love to say, especially to students when I speak to them, is to remind everybody that we are one human race. We have a lot of different ethnic groups. We only have one human race. Talking about farm workers specifically, when we started to organize farm workers, we kind of studied, because there have been many attempts to organize farm workers by different labor organizations, and they all failed. We came to the conclusion that the reason prior organizing attempts had failed is because organizers would come into an area, they would get people together, they would rile them up, they would have these strikes. Sometimes people would get killed, and then they would leave. And the farm workers were stuck with the consequences of their actions. So one of the decisions that we made is, we had to be there with the workers and let them know that we weren't going anywhere, that we were going to stay there with them. But the other thing is to make them understand that they had the power to change their conditions, that they could not and should not wait for somebody else to come and do it for them, that they had to do it for themselves. Many people, like all of us, sometimes we think the conditions are the way they are. There's nothing that we can do to change them. But when people understand that they can actually, by their own actions, change and improve their own lives and their own communities. So that was the biggest thing that we had to do. But in order to do that, we met with people in their homes, family by family, 6 to 8 people at a time. And we did this for 3 years before we ever had that first strike. It would be wonderful if everybody could work out there in the fields a couple of days of their life to see how physically taxing it is. You almost have to be like an athlete to be able to go out there and work in the fields. Many workers see this as their profession. They're very proud of the fact that they're farm workers, while other people might discriminate against them. I remember when I started organizing, people would say about farm workers, the employers would say, oh, we do the public a favor because we hire these degenerates. And that is the kind of a picture that they portrayed in the state legislature in Sacramento. Their representatives would say this in front of some of these committees. I remember saying to one of the agricultural representatives, if you ever say that again, I am going to talk about you, the employers, how you take advantage of workers, how you discriminate against them. And as you may know, they weren't even providing bathrooms in the fields for the workers. Workers did not have toilets. These are workers that are picking the food that is going to be put on a truck and go to your supermarket. And yet they didn't even have the basic necessities that they needed, like bathrooms in the fields, soap and water to wash their hands, cold drinking water in the hot sun, and of course the other basic things, rest periods, unemployment insurance, the right to organize. We knew from the very beginning when we started the Farm Workers Union that we were going to use the philosophy of nonviolence and follow the teachings of Gandhi. Of course, Dr. King was doing the same thing in the South. We were organizing at the same time. All of the studies that had been made about farm worker organizing, there had always been violence involved. And so that's what we said, no, it's going to be nonviolent. And we said right at the very beginning when we're organizing farm workers, don't be afraid because we are not organizing or trying to do this in a violent way. We are going to use nonviolence to make it happen. And even at that, as I just stated, we did have people that were killed, unfortunately. When you think that people were killed just to get the basic human rights, that just makes it so sad. So they were pretty much at the bottom of the barrel. I think that now there's a new awakening in our country. And people are seeing And I think a lot of it has to do with the social media. Nothing is invisible. Everything can be researched. People can mobilize very instantly. So I am very, very hopeful. And so I just think that the one thing that we need to do, though, is really continue educating people. But we have to go back to our kindergarten and start teaching little children. And because no child is born a racist. They are made that way by their parents or their traditions. And start teaching them what we talked about, that all people are one, that we're all Homo sapiens, that we're all humans, and that race doesn't exist. The racism, that is such a ridiculous notion. I think being an American is to fight for justice for everybody. When we talk, I get. This has never happened before. When you think that people are discriminated in their own country for no reason except for their ethnicity or their color of their skin, that is it's so sad, because it's so, we talked about before, it's so stupid. And when especially young children, that they just want to belong, they want to be appreciated and given opportunities, and when that is taken away from them, I mean, it's a loss for everybody. It's a loss for the whole nation. And I feel to be an American is to continue the fight for democracy, to fight for fairness. I remember when I was in the third grade, and we were told about the Bill of Rights. And I thought, oh my God, we can do this, We can actually not have a soldier stay in our house if we don't want them to. And that made me feel so proud to be an American at that point. And then as you go through life, and then you get all of these discriminations that we suffer in school, and again, harassment by the police, and you see when you're fighting for justice that you have all of this opposition. And then you see it happening right now, when people are fighting for the democracy of our country, and we're trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment, pass the bill to make sure everybody has the right to vote, for immigration reform, so that the immigrants that are here can become legalized and citizens, just like all the immigrant groups have done in the United States since the government was founded, And by the way, I say government, not country, because when the European immigrants, including my great-great-great-grandparents, the country was brown, because the people that lived here were brown, And but I think that we can make it happen. We can make our democracy live, but it's not going to happen unless everybody engages, until we make sure that everybody realizes that they not only have a right, but they have a responsibility to engage, that people have to vote, that everything that we want when we're protesting has got to be institutionalized. We've got to get the protest to become policy, so that it could be implemented, that people can be held accountable, so that these ideas that we want can be enforced. So I know we can make it work, but it's going to take all of us to make it happen, not only all of us as individual citizens, but also all of our institutions and all of the corporations. And they've got to be held accountable. You can't be a super billionaire and not pay your workers a living wage. The idea that the working people of this country can be demeaned and degraded and not be paid a sustainable wage to support their families, to get their kids to go to college, that is crazy. And we've got to take it on. Some people say to me, well, you're 91 years old. Isn't it time that you retire? I say no. As long as we know that there are more people, that we can meet with them, awaken them, make them understand that they have a role and a responsibility to make our government better, that we have to keep on doing it. Sí se puede. Mm-hmm.